Welcome to Wealth Coffee Chats, folks, for your daily live updates. Get the most out of today's episode by participating in the chat. Make sure you ask some questions, be part of the conversation, have a bit of fun, grab a coffee or a tea, take some notes, and get ready to start your day, folks. Quick few housekeeping rules, though. No spamming, no advertising or self-promotion in the chat. That's not on. Be kind and respectful to everyone when participating. And most of all, have a good time. Real estate investing can be your biggest asset. It also can be your most expensive asset when it comes to getting it right or getting it wrong, folks. It can be time-consuming, stressful, and that's why here at Positive, we have what's called a 6-star team, a full-service team that provides integrated wealth and property investing solutions and services simply designed to help you progress towards your goal of passive income through your property portfolio, folks. Make sure you check out our other podcasts on the Positive Mentor Network. Not only is there Wealth Coffee Chats, there's the Urban Property Investor. Drops every Wednesday with straight talking investing strategies and lessons with Sam Saggers. Property Investor Tales. This is where our clients, you guys, share real life stories from property investing, hosted by some of our advisors and strategists. And that's done every fortnight, dropping every Monday. Wealth, Wine and Wisdom, folks, that debriefs the week that was in the world of finance and property, hosted by yours truly, Jason Witten and Andy Fenton on Fridays. Welcome to another Wealth Coffee Chat. Marvellous Monday. Hope you're well, folks, wherever you are. If you think it's Get Rich Quick, you're in the wrong place. This is the wrong podcast. This is the wrong live for you. Welcome to another Wealth Coffee Chat. Hope you're all awesome and well. Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome to Wealth Coffee Chats. Good to see you. Monday, the 21st of October. Christmas is staring us down, folks. The world's gone by pretty fast this year, but certainly property investing is not slowing down. We're going to have a guest on today, so make sure you hang around, folks. Dr. Andrew Wilson's going to have a quick chat with us this morning. He's going to be our guest tonight at our mentoring, so make sure you register and come along. But before we do, we'll get the little intros and hellos and warm-ups out of the way. Good to see a few of you already on today. Sonia, good morning to you. Great to have you here. One of the regulars. Scott's in the house as well. Good to see you, Scott. Thanks for joining, as always, mate. For anyone who's new, well, hello. Jason Witten's my name. If you didn't already know that, you probably do. But if you don't, then now you do. Say a hello in the chat. Let us know where you are, what you're up to. We catch up each morning. Been doing this since COVID landed upon us, and probably 4 years now. Wealth Coffee Chats in the morning, about 10 past 8. We get together, have a quick 10 or 15-minute conversation over a coffee to try and stay on track with our property investing. It's a medium to long-term endeavor, this property investing thing. If you want to make some money, if you want to create some wealth, it's certainly not get rich quick. That's for sure. You've got to stick in there and understand. Takes a bit of time and patience, but, it's well worth it, folks. So each day we try and tackle a few little conversations that might be out and about in the marketplace and trying to make sense of them all. Morning, Brendan. Good morning to you. Thanks, Luke. Cheers, mate. Well, listen, folks, why don't we just crack on with this morning? Dr. Andrew is always our favourite commentator, economist on the property market in Australia, and he's the one who's nailed it every time we've brought him on at mentoring, and the one we listen to the most. So good morning, Dr. Andrew. Good to see you here on the Wealth Coffee Chats. Thanks for joining us this morning. Is it?
Thank you very much.
Not too early for you, is it? It's actually 10 past 9, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I've just finally got adjusted to daylight saving. I was up on the Gold Coast last weekend, so I'm sort of backwards and forwards with time, but that's the way it goes. But thank you for the introduction, and it's been a big year. I was going to say just 9 weeks till Christmas. Can you believe? So the year's
have you started any Christmas shopping yet? Like I've spoken to a few people and they're already Christmas shopping. I'm like, I don't know about you people. Like that's a bit organised for me.
I've already got all the suggestions from my partner, so it's and there's many of them, unfortunately, but we'll work our way through that one eventually.
Work your way through it. Well, I think a Christmas present for most property investors would be a little bit about, maybe interest rate cuts coming. Dr. Andrew, you and I were having a quick chat about this a moment ago, but tonight you're going to sort of maybe dive in, do the market update as you do for us. But what's the hot topic out there at the moment?
Well, look, earlier in the year, of course, Jason, there was plenty of chat about the prospect of interest rate cuts, particularly as the US was almost, blathering at the prospect of cuts. They eventually did cut them, but probably a little bit too much. But we sort of followed suit in terms of the news cycle, but really it was just a bit of clickbait. But we can be a lot more realistic about it now because the macro position has certainly improved. We've seen a big fall in inflation, basically generated by two main factors, and that's a collapse in the price of oil. Still keeping our eye on that, of course, given the shenanigans that are going on in the Middle East, and shenanigans is probably the wrong word. But we've also seen a big fall in electricity prices, courtesy of the handout from the federal government announced in the budget. So we're seeing now inflation falling rapidly towards the target point. Not there yet, but I think that we can now realistically start to discuss the prospect of lower interest rates. I don't think it'll happen this year. I think we're looking at the earliest, because the Reserve Bank has said that it's looking at the quarterly data for inflation. The next quarterly data will come out just before Melbourne Cup Day in about a week's time. And that'll show a sharp decline. But the Reserve Bank said it needs a consistent period of inflation in the target range. So even if we get close to the target range, which is 2 to 3% underlying inflation over the September quarter, I think we'd need another quarter, and maybe another quarter after that, the Reserve Bank's announcements to hold up, that is, a consistent period of lower inflation. So I think at the earliest we'd be looking at the February meeting of the Reserve Bank, which would follow on from the December quarter inflation numbers, but maybe even the May meeting, which would follow on from the March quarter results for inflation. But look, having said all that, we can certainly discuss this now as a realistic proposition. It was sort of clickbait earlier on, but now we can say that the macroeconomic factors are certainly pointing towards lower interest rates with inflation falling. The interesting thing is, Jason, of course, that typically a cut in interest rates comes about with the need to stimulate the economy, but our economy is still firing along on all 8 cylinders, if I can still use that comparison. Still 8 cylinders anymore, but very, very strong economy. No real sign of it slowing down. And here we have the prospect of lower interest rates, and of course, lower interest rates will only fuel housing market activity. We're going to have another strong year this year. Very similar overall, the results for our housing markets in terms of prices growth to what we achieved last year, which was around about 8% nationally. We're going to get about another 8% nationally this year. It's just the contributions are a little bit more mixed this year. We've got 3 very, very strong housing markets at the moment, which show no sign of slowing down.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's interesting. I can't remember the last time. Well, I don't think I've ever experienced places like Adelaide and Hobart having a median house price higher than Melbourne ever before. Has that ever happened? Those markets are powering along.
Look, the raw medians now in Brisbane and Adelaide are higher than Melbourne. But when we look at the adjusted median, which is important because there's different price factors in Melbourne and Sydney. They have very strong prestige markets compared to the smaller markets. So we have to adjust for that strength at the upper end of the market in Melbourne and Sydney particularly. But even given that, no doubt that even with that adjustment, that the Brisbane and the Adelaide markets are closing in rapidly on Melbourne. But the raw medians, they're now above Melbourne. Who could have believed that Brisbane and Adelaide would have a higher median house price than Melbourne? But I do think given the prospect of lower interest rates, that does scream value for that Melbourne market going
Yeah,
forward.
that's what we've been talking about. Yeah.
It just needs something to kick it along. I think confidence is still low in Melbourne. It really hasn't recovered, following those severe lockdowns through the COVID period. The economy's still doing okay, but I think it just needs a little bit of a kick along in confidence. Lower interest rates will certainly help that. But it's the upper end of the Melbourne market that's really been dragging the chain. It's, mid-priced and lower-priced areas in Melbourne are still finding buyers, but it's the upper end of the market that's still quite stagnant. And, as I said, I think lower interest rates will help to revive that Melbourne market next year. But there's no need of a revival in Adelaide, Brisbane, or Perth, and Sydney's still, tracking along quite reasonably after another positive year. But the Sydney prices, it's more about affordability barriers that are now restricting prices growth rather than a lack of demand. Last weekend in Sydney, we had another 70% plus clearance rate in the auction market. Auction sales, the actual selling of property under the hammer in Sydney, has been at record levels this year. So even though clearance rates haven't been as high as last year in Sydney, the number of sales actually occurring has been considerably higher. And that's because we've seen a surge of auction listings, not just in Sydney, but in all the capitals. And that's because sellers have come back into the market this year, confidence restored. Last year, it was about buyers coming into the market following the 2022 downturn, looking for value opportunities. That picked the market up. This year, sellers have come back into the market, and that's how the cycle typically works. And we've had considerable volumes of property sales this year. And of course, as we mentioned before, with interest rates falling, that's just another fillip for housing markets generally, and it's certainly, does it get any better for property owners? I'm certainly not sure it's going to get any better for Perth, Brisbane, or Adelaide that are just flying at the moment, particularly that Perth market.
Charging along. Well, we always talk about supply, and you always provide. And tonight you'll dive a little bit deeper into that stuff, I'm quite sure. But talking about housing crisis, it's a bit dramatic sometimes when they the newspaper headlines come out. But what's the latest on the supply chain? The cost of it's up quite high, and the difficulty to bring projects to market are going to exacerbate it as well.
Yeah, that's right, Jason. And there's no sign of an improvement overall in our building cycle, our home building cycle. We've seen house building pick up. That's certainly improving. The trend is now rising for house building, particularly in those strong capitals we've already mentioned, Adelaide, Perth, and Brisbane. Sydney's still underperforming in terms of new house building numbers, but that's the Sydney market for you. It's just really constrained in terms of the potential for broadacre development. Melbourne's also doing what it always does, building more houses. But the real problem is unit development, Jason. That's still falling away. And that's what we probably really need, is more units. That gives us more properties per square metre, of course. But the problems still remain, particularly planning restrictions for middle ring suburbs and inner ring suburbs in our major capitals. And as you said, building costs, which have started to taper off, but are still rising at around about 3% a year, which is well above what we're used to seeing building costs for houses and units rise, typically 1% to 2%. So even though that's improving, it's still high. And that, of course, is another constraint for getting the buildings we need, the homes we need, the new homes we need to offset all this demand that we have, not just the recovery demand from 2022, but now, of course, we've got the other recovery demand coming from migration, and we've seen a flood of migrants, of course, coming into Australia as our borders were opened post-COVID, and that's had a particular influence on our rental markets. And we know that we've seen some crazy low vacancy rates, certainly continuing, perhaps a little bit better than where they were. But I don't think the improvement in the rental market is because we're starting to see a rebalancing of supply and demand. I think it's because we're seeing some social change happening out there with prospective tenants either putting off their decisions to enter the rental market, staying at home longer, or making, different decisions, sharing with siblings or friends, looking for a unit rather than a house, moving to an outer suburb, which is more affordable, or even moving to a regional area. And this is because rents are still, really, very expensive in relative sense, but also vacancy rates are still well below 2%, which is sort of the balanced benchmark in most capital cities for both houses and units. So even though we're seeing a little bit of an improvement in terms of rental growth, improvement from the perspective of the tenant, and we're seeing vacancy rates a little higher, although still low, we've still got queues of people, outside, properties that are advertised for rent. So it's still a very tough gig out there. But of course, investors are taking advantage of this. And when we look at the latest home lending data, there's been a massive surge in investor lending over the last 12 months, particularly, of course, in those states, where capital cities are booming, such as Western Australia, South Australia, and Queensland. Big numbers of investors coming into the market. So that sort of tells you the whole story, doesn't it? That
it does.
You follow the money, and the money's heading for investment properties at the moment, certainly.
Yeah, well, listen, the investor can, use the rent plus their own incomes, and the serviceability is much better for them. The owner occupiers a little bit struggles a little bit, and some of the governments have beefed up some first home buyer grants and a few other bits and pieces, but still the borrowing and the lending's quite out of reach for the newer homes, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. And look, this is the problem, and it's sort of a longer term problem. I'm not sure we'll ever match supply and demand in our housing markets, particularly our rental markets, going forward. I mean, the federal government's sort of looking at some what I consider to be knee-jerk reactions by reducing the number of international students coming into Australia. I'm not sure the university tertiary sectors are celebrating that one, because that's what they rely on for their income. And now we're going to cut it by, I think, a third, the number of international students coming in. And this is a sort of a short-term, response. Yes, there's an election in the air. You can understand that the government's very nervous about its prospects. We've seen, what happens to governments that can't provide adequate housing for their populations. Western Europe, UK. We're seeing the rise of dissatisfied electors, and you can understand that. But as I said, I think the reason the biggest problem we have in terms of our student demand supply ratio is that we've shut our borders. Nobody came in for a couple of years, students. Now they're flooding in, but in the same number as we usually have. But unfortunately, we don't have any outflow because nobody's got their degree over the last 3 years. Now, eventually, that's going to balance out over the next few years as the students coming in then start to graduate and they leave the country, and that takes some pressure off. But as I said, it's not going to do the universities any good to see, as I said, what I believe is a 30% cut in the intake for international students, and that works its way through the economy, of course. There are jobs that are lost. There's income that's lost. But the big picture is, in terms of the Australian economy, is it's very, very strong. It just has shown no signs of slowing down, despite 13 interest rate increases since May 2022. We've still got a very low unemployment rate. We've got the lowest ever participation rate. So we're dragging record numbers of potential workers into the real workforce. And we're creating tens of thousands of new jobs every month, and wages are rising at the strongest level since the great mining boom of the late noughties. So, and now we can start realistically discussing on top of that an interest rate cut coming forward next year. So good news for homeowners.
There you go. Good news indeed, mate. Well, listen, tonight we're going to dive a bit deeper into that, so I'm quite excited. I love to hear from you and what you've got to say, and certainly tonight, folks, if you haven't already registered, you get on to the emails or let your coach know But Dr. Andrew is going to dive deeper into all of his data tonight and give us the insight of the next quarter or more into the property market. So great to have you on this morning, Dr. Andrew. Awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate that. And we'll see you tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm looking forward to tonight too. Lots of info.
Cheers, mate. All right, folks. Well, there you go. Make sure you get along this evening. You'll get all the inside from Dr. Andrew. But that's it from us here at Wealth Coffee Chats this morning. Hopefully that got you thinking. Good data, good information, good energy in the marketplace. Are you in position? Are you ready to take advantage? And if you're not, well, let's make sure you get ready because there's some good things coming our way, I think, at the right time. But all right, folks. Well, that's it. Take care. Wealth Coffee Chat's done and dusted. See you tonight if you're coming to mentoring. Till then, take care, folks. Bye for now. Cheers. Episode of Wealth Coffee Chat, folks. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a thing when we go live. Improve your portfolio and investing game, folks, with Wealth Coffee Chats live every morning at 8:10 each weekday. Make sure you join us. Previous episodes are also available wherever you get your podcasts, folks, as well as our other podcasts from the 6 Star team here at positivementor.com.au.